Welcome to the Cult is King podcast. I'm your host, The Duke, here with my co-host, Rambling Bones.
Hello again.
And we're here today with another cult movie. But first, what is a cult movie?
Cult movies are those films off the beaten path. The ones that they have a following, but they maybe don't have a great renowned.
Right.
And we're trying to share them with you.
Yeah, these are the movies that people still talk about, but they never hit the mainstream. Or if they did, their days in the mainstream are long behind them.
Or they've hit the mainstream because we got to capitalize on those nerd bucks.
Or in the case of this week's movie, Flash Gordon, maybe you came across it because of the silly Seth MacFarlane movie.
2 silly Seth MacFarlane movies.
I'm going to go ahead and be upfront with my biases. This is one of my favorite movies, just period. And I'll go ahead and start us off with the synopsis. So in Flash Gordon, the Earth is being set upon by a bunch of cataclysms. Earthquakes, tornadoes, hot hail, and nobody's quite sure what's causing it. Travel agent Dale Arden and quarterback Flash Gordon are traveling by plane when this catastrophe brings down their plane near the lab of one Hans Zarkov. Now, Zarkov is full aware of what's causing these events. He's convinced that the Earth is under attack by alien forces and takes with him Dale and Flash to help him operate his rocket at gunpoint, where they are taken in by one Ming the Merciless of planet Mongo, who has been causing all of these things for his amusement. They there travel to Mongo, where they escape from Ming, go on a series of adventures recruiting the various factions on planet Mongo and its surrounding moons, and stage a coup.
Yeah.
I think that's not perfect, but would you say that's an accurate synopsis?
Pretty accurate.
There's the premise.
I will say, though, it's not that they brought down the plane near. They literally crashed their plane right into Zarkov's building right when he needs somebody to be shanghaied into his rocket.
You got to give this to Zarkov. He's ready to go up with no plan and a gun to go fix whatever this is.
He's certainly motivated.
So Flash Gordon was based off of a series of comic strips in the 1930s by Alex Raymond. They were kind of made to capitalize on the popularity of Buck Rogers, but they quickly took on a life of their own. During that time in Old Hollywood, there was a series of serials featuring Buster Crabbe.
Which is an amazing name, like just
Buster Crabbe. But anyway, there really wasn't a lot going on with Flash Gordon for a while. There was a cartoon at some point. I want to say in like the 1970s, Filmation did a cartoon. But this was kind of Flash Gordon's return to relevance, if you will. So obviously this movie came out to capitalize on the success of Star Wars, which was huge and has spawned tons of imitators. But one thing I think is unique about this movie is though it may have been made to cash in on Star Wars a little bit, this is definitely not a Star Wars clone.
No, unlike Battle Beyond the Stars, which is more obviously taking from Star Wars, this movie is, it's pretty much, we're just making a sci-fi movie. This has no relation in any way to Star Wars, other than I guess you have an evil emperor.
Well, and it's kind of coming full circle, because one of the things that influenced George Lucas when he made Star Wars was the old Flash Gordon serials and comic strips. So now the popularity of Star Wars has given sci-fi enough of a boost that a movie like this could be made.
Yeah, and they didn't make a bad parody. They took the original material seriously.
They did, and that's not to say that this is a terribly serious movie. It can be very silly at parts, and there's definitely a little tongue-in-cheek here or there. But mostly it's a pretty, in my mind, sincere attempt to take the comic strips and boil them down to a movie.
There are definitely some issues with the writing in some places.
Beautiful issues.
Well, I know that Sam Jones, who plays Flash Gordon, if I remember correctly, he won a Golden Raspberry for horrible performance. But I'm willing to defend him in that I don't think it was so much his performance. It was just all of the lines that were written for Flash are so much worse than the lines written for any other character. I just watched this recently, and the entire time I was thinking, wow, Flash, what an incredibly stupid thing to say. why is it only you who have lines written like this?
I don't know. I kind of think some of his stating the obvious and some of his like goody two shoes rambling, or not rambling's not the wrong word, but what's the word for some of it's just blather.
Yeah.
But you know what? It almost makes him more endearing.
I don't know. I was pretty sure that it wasn't Jones's delivery, although I will say this was a very early role for Jones, and it shows. But it really does seem like in the writer's attempt to give Flash a voice, he made Flash stupid.
Well, you know what? Flash is a jock.
Sure.
That being said, this was a very early role for Sam Jones. What actually got him the job was the producer, Dino De Laurentiis. His mother-in-law was watching TV, and Sam Jones was in a parody of The Dating Game. And as she was watching it, she knew that he was going to make this movie, and she called him up and is like, I have found your Flash Gordon. In fact, part of the reason Sam Jones was chosen is because young Sam Jones, in De Laurentiis' mind, looked a lot like a young Buster Crabbe, who actually, believe it or not, personally gave Sam Jones his blessing to be the new Flash.
I'm amazed anyone even bothered to ask Buster Crabbe.
You know what? They should. It's a pity. Some of these old serials were actually incredibly entertaining, and it's a pity that they're not more loved than they are.
Well, I think it's because there were so many serials. I mean, not specifically a Flash Gordon, but a lot of serials were made, and let's just say not all of them were gems. In fact, I'd say more of them were not gems.
Though, that's true of any art form, is 90% of it's going to be garbage. But, the gems are still worth looking at.
Oh, yeah.
And,
I don't see, I guess, do you know if Jones specifically went to ask Buster Crabbe?
I don't. In fact, do you want to know how I know that Buster Crabbe gave Jones his seal of approval?
How?
It's not in any of the other sources I was looking. I have a copy of Flash Gordon, the role-playing game. And would you know who wrote an intro? Sam. And he talked about it. So I think he might have gone to Buster Crabbe. I think he was looking... So I saw an interview with Sam Jones in a famous Monsters of Filmland copy I have here. This is issue 287. And it was talking about his experiences on set. And one thing I learned about Sam is he was putting everything into this role. It doesn't sound like he really likes this movie, but he didn't really get to appreciate filming it too much because he was either working out to keep his physique for it, practicing bull whips, or doing ridiculous scenes. There's going to be a scene at some point where him and Prince Barin, who's played by Timothy Dalton, are fighting on this big revolving table of doom that has spikes and stuff coming out of it. So he's practicing trying to stay and keep his footing while he's fighting on there. He was really doing everything. So I wouldn't be surprised if he sought out Buster Crabbe to get the blessing and get any ideas.
I wonder how serious everyone else took this compared to him.
I definitely think there's a little scenery chewing, but you know what? I thought most of the actors were great in this.
And you mentioned Timothy Dalton, who this wasn't his first role, but he wasn't James Bond yet.
No, this was a pre-Bond Timothy Dalton.
But for me, Timothy Dalton's he's pretty high up there on the list of really good actors. So that's a strong grab for the movie. And then also having Max von Sydow be Ming the Merciless.
Definitely a big one. But, I think another good grab was Brian Blessed for Prince Voltan. In fact, I think many people would agree that he kind of steals the show in most of his scenes.
He's certainly a standout character. I'm not sure, though, if he has ever been a terribly known actor outside of being voice and stage.
I think he is in the UK. He did do a lot of TV, and I think it was serious television that he was doing, especially a lot of period pieces. But I don't know if he was as well known across the pond. In fact, most viewers would know Brian from, if not Flash Gordon, he does the voice of Boss Nass, the big Gungan in episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Everyone's favorite.
And he also did the voice of Clayton, the evil hunter in Tarzan, the Disney version.
He's also Santa Claus in The Amazing World of Gumball.
That's probably his most prestigious,
Probably most
prestigious.
prestigious, yeah.
Well, and not only did he do that voice role in Tarzan, but he also helped with the Tarzan yell.
What do you mean the Tarzan yell?
Oh, I can't do it, but that's one of the things that he's credited as is Tarzan yell.
I like like spec- I guess you don't know, but my confusion is whenever Tarzan yells, that's Brian Blessed, or is
I
there
think
a
so.
specific project called Tarzan Yell?
No, it's he's in Tarzan. It's a Tarzan voice credit, and it's I think Tarzan yell is what's written down. So I haven't watched Tarzan recently, but if anybody could shed any light on that, that's what the comment section's for.
If there's a point in the movie where he yells and he sounds like a burly British man as opposed to his typical voice actor, you'll know that that's Brian Blessed.
Gordon's alive?
Yeah, the cast is pretty great. However, Max von Sydow as Ming, the whole time, all I could think of is Christopher Lee as Fu Manchu. It's like the casting is in the exact same
Well,
vein.
one thing I want to put out before anybody tries to cancel Max von Sydow.
Is that he's dead?
Well, that's going to make it harder, yes. But Ming isn't Asian. He's from planet Mongo.
And he does have a Fu Manchu.
Well, it's a good look.
Yeah.
You know what, though? It was interesting casting, but what's even more interesting to me is, yeah, that was kind of a strange choice, but does he not look like Ming the Merciless?
Well, I mean, he's definitely under makeup, but it's less impressive that he looks like Ming and more that his performance is just really good as Ming.
It is, and it was kind of interesting because in the same issue of Famous Monsters, they were showing a retro review with Max von Sydow. It was before Flash was coming out, but this was kind of a strange role for him to take, and though he wasn't necessarily interested in doing this as a series or anything, he mentions choosing it just because it was so different. It was just kind of a challenge for him.
Well,
I think he pulled it off.
He was in The Exorcist like prior to this, so he is now. That movie is one of the greatest of all time. So you go from The Exorcist to I'm gonna do Flash Gordon and play the bad guy.
But you know what? Flash Gordon, in my book, is one of the greatest of all time.
I'm talking,
But I am saying, yeah, it is interesting because his whole career has just been very interesting. The movies that he has agreed to show up in, he's had a lot of, movies that would be more, I guess, serious cinema, but he's also appeared in things like Conan the Barbarian and Episode 8 of Star Wars, though that was kind of a nothing burger.
I think that was 7.
Oh, it was 7. Yeah. That's right.
He dies in 5 seconds. I don't know
I'm
why
sure
he's
that's
there.
I'm sure. Oh, and he also played Blofeld. He was one of the Blofelds in one of the James Bond movies.
Really? I didn't see that.
It was. I'd have to look again to see which one it was. It was not any of the ones that Timothy Dalton was in. In fact, I don't think Timothy Dalton's Bond ever faced Blofeld.
No, I think this was when they were taking it a little more seriously.
Well, and what's interesting, too, is that's not the only Bond connection here. So not only do we have a James Bond and a Blofeld in this movie, but though he didn't play his role as big as one of those, Topol, the actor who plays Hans Zarkov, who was also in a Bond movie. Not that means a whole lot, but I just thought it was interesting that 3 of our actors were part of the Bond franchise.
Also, James Bond movies, they have great music. Speaking of great music, the segue here, Queen does some of the soundtrack for this movie.
Right, and I think that at the time this was kind of before having, especially for like a sci-fi or fantasy movie, having a like popular rock group do a soundtrack was kind of not quite in vogue yet.
Well, it's not even just like we made a song. Some of the movie is just scored by them. There is a composer named Howard Blake who did all the symphonic music, but then whenever the score switches to like Brian May's guitar, which you can easily hear, that's when the Queen score kicks in. So you have sort of 2 soundtracks going. It is a little frustrating that of the songs written, they only wrote 1. Yeah. And then they milk it into the ground.
But you know what? If you're gonna milk one, It was pretty good. And by pretty good, I mean it's completely ridiculous and I love it. You've probably heard it. If you have, it's like that Flash. Whoa.
Yeah,
Savior of the universe.
you've probably heard it before.
If not, look it up.
Yeah. And it's at the opening to the movie, which is they've got a compilation of comic strips while playing that song, and it's great.
And also, you see, like, keeps cutting to, you don't see Ming's face, but he's activating, like, all of the disasters.
Well, when watching that, I made a note to myself to mention he's got all these buttons in front of him that all have disasters, but he doesn't press any. He uses his laser powers to push the buttons, and instead of actually pressing them with his fingers.
Well, you know what? I'm going to level with you, Bones. If I had laser fingers, I don't think I'd get up to do anything.
It's not laser fingers. It's a laser ring.
Well, that's true. Yes,
Laser fingers would have been too much on the budget.
You know, I think now that I think about it, a laser ring would probably be a lot more practical than laser fingers.
But the Queen song and the Queen music is pretty good. I wish that they wrote more songs for it.
Yeah, they could have done more with the soundtrack, but ultimately I do love the theme, and I do think for most of it it works. But they definitely could have done more had they been so motivated and or paid.
Highlander, they did 3 songs, maybe more for that. I'm pretty sure it was just 3. And every single one's a banger. And we only got one banger out of this. And I did get tired of hearing the dun 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 repeatedly.
I didn't, but I could see how that would.
It's a 2-hour movie. Okay, yeah. I need them to have a little diversity in there.
I tell you what, though, I think one of my favorite parts of the movie is just like the characters and the sets, like the setting.
Mm-hmm.
It's very different from, well, really, I was gonna say sci-fi movies of the time, but really, especially sci-fi movies from now. Everything's very colorful. Lots of like reds and golds and like the throne room, and then like you have like Arborea, the plant, like the forest moon, and then you have the flying city that the Hawkmen live in.
It's very pretty. There's a lot of artistry in it. Everything looks like a painting you would see from like a sci-fi artist from the 70s is what it all looks like to me.
Well, and I think they did a good job of trying to take what was in the newspaper comics and like really try to bring it to life rather than try to completely reimagine it. And you'll even see like the spaceships and stuff they have there. They have a very like 30s rocket
look to them.
It's hard for me to describe, but it doesn't look like it was inspired by Star Wars at all.
No, it did 2 things, or it avoided 2 things that I really hate. One is when they adapt the original material and don't even bother to attempt to make it look like the original thing. And the second thing is they don't even attempt to make it look like the thing, but then they give you a wink and a nod. Like, hey, look at this original thing. You remember that? Well, we knowingly didn't do that and instead gave you this new design, which is half-hearted.
Well, and if you were a fan of Flash Gordon at the time and this movie came out and you went to see it, I think you'd be pretty happy with how they treated Flash.
Yes.
In fact, really, though there's still lots of Flash Gordon media out there, not a lot of big projects, mind you, but there's still like comics are made every so often. There's still figures and role-playing games and stuff, but a lot of them now exist because of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
This movie reintroduced Flash to a new generation.
Yeah, and anybody who, I hate to say like rediscovers music, but whenever somebody finds Queen, who, you know, didn't grow up listening to Queen, they will inevitably find the Flash Gordon song.
Well, and one thing that was a huge boon for this movie, well, 2 things. So one was Seth MacFarlane's Ted movie, and then Ted 2 also. But one of it was Sam Jones's willingness to like own this movie and continue to be a part of things. Not only has he always been happy to like go to conventions, you know, and be Flash, but his willingness to make fun of himself and show up on the Ted movies, really, I think, got a lot of people looking into Flash Gordon.
Yeah, he shows up in those movies as himself. If you haven't
Right.
seen them before,
Which is, and it's, the first one was pretty funny. At least the scenes with Sam Jones were pretty great.
which reminds me, speaking of Seth MacFarlane, Brian Blessed shows up, does a voice in an episode of Family Guy, and you know who he voices?
That couldn't possibly.
Voltan. He
Right.
voices Voltan.
Well, despite not being the first to portray Voltan, if you think Voltan, that's who you're thinking of.
Well, honestly, when anybody alive now thinks about anybody Flash Gordon wise, they think of this movie. They do not think of the Buster Crab.
They do if they watch Svengoolie.
I'm gonna say that a lot of the people who watch Svengoolie do not think of the Buster Crab.
Well, they did if they watched it in Sven's surround like I did.
I'm just
You guys should watch Svengoolie. But no, you're right. I don't think it's dropped off into complete obscurity. I think it's one of the better remembered serials. But I mean, you're right. Not a lot of people watch old Hollywood serials, which is sad.
there are very few people in my world who even know what a serial is,
Yeah,
let alone watch one.
you have to be on the right message boards.
I'm talking, real life interactions here.
Overrated.
Uh,
I'll say too, some of the action scenes in here are absolutely bonkers, but so original. So part of the thing is that Flash travels around, having escaped Ming, and he gets the other. So none of the princes and leaders of the various factions on Mongo like Ming, but he kind of keeps them all at each other's throats, and rules by fear. So he eventually gets some of them. He gets the Prince of Arborea and Voltan to team up. And there's this scene where they're these big ships from Mongo, and they're being swarmed by just armies of Hawkmen diving at them. It's absolutely crazy. I don't know if I've ever seen something like that.
yeah, it's it almost reminds me of like a pirate movie ship battle, but 'cause
Yeah,
you've got
parts.
all of these, except there's only one ship and there's Hawkmen with lasers, and it's in space.
There's also, I love the scene where Flash is fighting Prince Baron. So they are doing some sort of right by combat because both have been captured by Prince Voltan. And they're on this giant, dais. And the dais is constantly rotating and spikes are coming out and stuff. And they're fighting with, bullwhips.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of there's constant action, but the action never feels samey, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One really original part where Flash proceeds to play football.
Against, Ming's guards.
Yeah, that's the only way I can describe it. They've just been captured, and they are in the throne room, and Flash starts fighting the guards. But one way is he starts throwing these metal egg things at them, doing football moves. Literally, it's just football. You watch it and you hear Hank Williams Jr. start playing in your head.
Are you ready for some football?
And then Zarkov accidentally hits Flash in the head with a metal egg, and the scene proceeds to end.
Well, and that's part of what I love about this movie is when I say it takes Flash seriously, I don't necessarily mean this is a super serious movie. The tone is kind of light, and it definitely isn't afraid to be ridiculous, but it's not parody. It's not like the treatment Green Hornet got with Seth Rogen, where they took the premise and then just kind of crapped all over it.
Listen here, okay? Superhero movies are popular, and I'm Seth Rogen. We gotta take a property no one cares about and insert me into it.
Yeah, just on a brief tangent, I heard at one point that Seth Rogen wanted to do a remake of The Last Starfighter,
Oh.
and I was furious. Seth Rogen, you just stay away from this movie, you hear?
The guy who's like a turtle could be James Franco, and they could smoke weed in the cockpit.
Here, before we move on, you wanna give the audience your Seth Rogen laugh?
No, I don't. Let's move
Are you
on.
sure? Well, good. Well, I have to hear it every day.
Yeah, no, the audience doesn't need that.
Okay, well, fair enough. But yeah, no, the movie is just so fun. It's an adventure movie. It's a sci-fi movie. There's some comedy in there.
Queen.
There's Queen.
There's budget Sarlacc pit.
There is a budget Sarlacc pit. Well, and another thing, did you know that Sam Jones actually was a football player?
I sort of guessed, but I didn't really. I didn't dive that deep. Was he ever professional or was it college?
Marine Corps.
Oh, didn't
He played
even
football in the Marine
didn't
Corps.
realize he was in the Marines.
He was. No, in a lot of ways, he had a great physique for this to be Flash.
Yeah, no, he looks the part.
And like I said, I definitely would agree with you that some of his delivery and some of the lines written were pretty silly. But overall, I kind of liked his portrayal of Flash. I don't think it deserved a
See, that's the
or
thing.
you say a golden raspberry,
Yeah, I think that's just a Razzie. But
a Razzie or whatever. I don't think it deserved that.
no, it's like I like his performance. I just think that whoever wrote the screenplay
Improvements could have been made.
improved. There are 3 writers attached to this movie, and I don't know who did what or what. But I think with 3 writers, maybe some of Flash's dialogue could have been improved.
I will agree with you on that. I'll let you have that one. We've talked about some of the cast and crew already, but let's get some of the ones we missed. So, you want to go ahead and start us off?
Yeah, so we talked about Sam Jones, who's Flash. Apart from being in Ted, I wanted to point out he was in a TV adaptation of The Spirit, who...
he was, as the Spirit, if I remember.
As the Spirit. I'm a big fan of The Spirit. That movie with Samuel L. Jackson is an abomination and should be blown up. And I also want to point out he was in Thunder in Paradise with the greatest actor of all time, Hulk Hogan. And I think this was actually at the period at which he was Hollywood Hulk Hogan.
That's right. The aptly named Hollywood Hulk Hogan. He was also in a TV show. It didn't run for very long, but he was the star called, I believe it was The Highwayman.
Mm-hmm.
He did a lot of television as well. I don't know what you saw, but from what I saw, I don't think he was ever in anything as big a role as he had in Flash Gordon. But he did get work consistently.
No, he never stopped working.
In fact, I think he's still working as we speak. Because I think I was looking and I don't think his last role was that long ago.
You know, from when I looked at his credits, I'm pretty sure he's still got things going on.
And I appreciate that he's been a good ambassador for this character in this movie.
Next, we have Dale, who's played by Melody Anderson, and she's pretty good in this movie. There's one scene that I liked, but also felt a little almost out of character, because you don't really, she doesn't do a whole lot. And then when she's been locked in the palace and she escapes and she kills like 6 guards all by herself, and it's like, wow, this is cool. This is really strange though.
Hey, the travel agent business is a lot rougher than you might expect.
She has a laser gun and does a cartwheel into shooting a bad guy.
Don't mess with travel agents.
But I'm sure that there are more important roles with all of these people who we are glossing over. I'm picking the movies I wanted to point out, okay? And she was in John Carpenter's Elvis, starring Kurt Russell as Elvis.
I have never seen that, and I often forget that was a thing. Her filmography was a little shorter than some of the other actors, too. Did she mainly do TV, or did she kind of...
It looked like she did a little bit of TV and then did some cult movies, like Dead and Buried and Firewalker.
Okay.
Other than those 3, that's what I had down for her. Next is Max von Sydow as Ming. He's in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we could go all episode just listing stuff he was in, but we've covered some of the bigger or more notable to cult viewer roles.
The Seventh Seal, The Exorcist, and This is actually because I didn't realize it. He's in the Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd.
Is he really? Was he what was his role?
I don't remember.
Because I've seen that movie.
It's been so long since I've seen that movie, and I can't remember if he has an actual important role or if he's just a guy in a helmet like a lot of other characters in that movie.
I want to say that one of Max von Sydow's very first roles, do you know what one of his early roles was that was big?
What?
He was in The Greatest Story Ever Told.
Oh!
Do you know who he played?
No.
Jesus.
I'm going to have to rewatch that because I don't remember that at all.
I've seen that. That's another movie I saw a long time ago, and it never occurred to me that was Max von Sydow.
Man.
He really fell off, though, becoming Ming the Merciless, turned to the dark side.
Or imagine Rob Schneider having more screen time than you in Judge Dredd.
That's a black pill.
Next, I had Zarkov, who's played by, I believe his name is...
He just simply goes by Topol.
He goes by the name Topol, but I think his first name is either Haim or Chaim. I've seen it spelled with a C, and I've seen it spelled with just an H.
Well, regardless of being born with a first name, he simply just goes by Topol. That's how he's credited. But his most famous role, probably, period, was he had the lead in Fiddler on the Roof, and the 1970s adaptation.
Yeah, he's Fiddler on the Roof, and he's also in For Your Eyes Only.
That was the Bond film.
That was the Bond movie. And apart from that, just looking at his career, he did do a lot of acting, but he also did a lot of singing and a lot of political activism, and was known as Topol.
That being said, he was a great Zarkov in this movie.
Yeah.
He's the right amount of encouraging and unhinged.
Which I'm pretty sure that this is after Fiddler on the Roof, but that movie is like pretty beloved and his performance is pretty famous.
Yeah, it's a certified classic. It's not a controversial, opinion. So yeah, it's funny that and I want to say that was made in 1977.
Mm-hmm.
So no, this did come after it, and now he's Zarkov and Flash Gordon. But you know what? More power to the movie makers for being able to get him in it. Yeah. I think he definitely makes the movie more fun.
He is a very good, I don't know if all of his other roles are character roles, but this is like a character actor's perfect spot, and he blows it out of the water. Next, I have Princess Aura,
the daughter of Ming the Merciless,
who is played by Ornella Muti. She is Italian, and a lot of her movies are Italian. So
that's the problem I went when I was trying to look up what she was in.
She was in Oscar, also with Sylvester Stallone. I have no clue if this is any good, but it had a fun name, The Voyage of Captain Fracassa.
There's no way that couldn't be good.
Yeah. And I guess this is one of her notable roles, but I also wrote it down for ulterior reasons, but she's in The Most Beautiful Wife. Now, Duke, why might I write down The Most Beautiful Wife?
I feel like I should know this, but do you want to jog my memory?
There is a Whitest Kids You Know sketch called The Most Loveliest Bride.
Okay, now it's all coming back to me.
And all I could think of is just, I've got to see The Most Loveliest Bride.
So here's a little, for those of you looking, who want those parasocial relationships here, if you want a little insight into what it's like to know Bones has probably watched every episode of The Whitest Kids You Know a minimum of 5 times.
Yeah. That movie might be fine. I don't know. It made me giggle. Baron is Timothy Dalton. He's in License to Kill and The Living Daylights as James Bond. He's also in The Rocketeer, which is fantastic.
Right. And will probably appear on this podcast in the next 20 episodes or so.
And he's in Hot Fuzz, which is also great.
I have not seen Hot Fuzz.
You should watch Hot Fuzz.
Okay, who does that leave us?
Finally is Voltan, who's Brian Blessed. Pretty much everything we said earlier is all I have written
I do
down.
have another interesting thing. He was in the original Broadway run of Cats.
Great. I'm
It's
glad
not
you
one of my
told me
personal
that.
favorites, but it is notable.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Do you know who he was in Cat?
He played two roles. I don't remember which ones they were exactly.
It's probably for the best.
For the record, if you were gonna, you wouldn't be able to miss him.
Yeah.
And then I added actually one more person. Those are probably most of the most important roles, but one character that seemed to kind of also be important was General Clytus. You'll recognize him if you're watching the movie as the fellow who looks a lot like Doctor Doom.
Yes.
He's played by Peter Wingard. He was in a lot of like TV shows. He played a character named Jason King across like two different shows, but apparently he was known for dressing very like flamboyantly and was a style icon in Britain.
Really?
Really. But what's funny though, because you never see him, he's Doctor Doom looking in this movie.
Well, for one, yeah, you never see him. And B, I did look him up, and his IMDb picture made me think that he was like in. I didn't really look at his films, but he looked like he was the type of guy in cowboy films.
Right. What was interesting too about General Clytus is, unlike every other character we mentioned, he was original to this movie.
But he fits perfect.
He does. I think he gives more life to, the armies of Mongo.
Mm-hmm.
But he was an original creation for the film, though he, like Bone said, he fits like a glove. Everybody else is taken directly from the comic strips.
Do you reckon they were trying to ape Darth Vader?
They might have, but they made him distinct enough that...
I mean, yeah, that was a thought that literally just popped in my head. I didn't think that watching the movie.
But, they might have. He's certainly the kind of character who looks good on a movie poster, and if I was going to try to sell action figures, I imagine he would be popular.
Well, as far as the movie poster goes, Max von Sydow's bald head really takes up about 99% of any poster you will see for Flash Gordon.
That's true, but, as probably the biggest actor...
I guess the last two people I bothered putting on here was Mike Hodge, the director, didn't do a lot. Haven't seen any of his movies apart from Flash Gordon, but he made a movie called Get Carter, Black Rainbow, and The Terminal Man. And I don't think he really directed a whole lot other than those movies and this, and I think this was his... I mean, if he's remembered for anything, he's probably remembered for this.
Right.
And then I want to mention Howard Blake, the guy who composed the music that isn't guitar. And his music is actually really good in this movie, I thought. But he did the music for The Duelist, Amityville 3D, the classic, everyone's favorite in the series. And then The Snowman. Now, Duke, why is The Snowman significant?
Why are you always putting me on the spot like this?
Because it's important that we have this trivia between us. It's related to the show.
We've talked about it in some... Wait a second. No, I don't know.
And the director of Battle Beyond the Stars directed The Snowman.
Oh!
And it also features David Bowie, who's most famous for his role in Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me.
I'm sure that's how he's best remembered. You know what, though? So he did The Snowman, he did Flash Gordon, and he did a John Wayne movie. Or no, but that's the Shootist I'm thinking of.
Yeah. No, The Duelist is something entirely different.
I've never seen it.
I haven't seen it either, but I am told that it is very good.
Well, maybe that'll get an episode.
I have seen Amityville 3D. It is not good.
Is it like so bad it's good, or is it just bad?
It's one of those movies you put on, on the TV because you can't stand the sound of your own thoughts, and you're, playing video games and listening to the TV.
Gotta have at least, 2 to 3 points of distraction at once.
You've got to be playing Subway Surfer while watching it.
By the way, guys, we're thinking of ways to drum up engagement on the channel here. How would you feel if we just keep the lower third just Subway Surfers?
And then another third can be Minecraft speed runs.
Hey, what if one of us puts ourselves on camera reacting to the podcast we just made?
No, it'd be even better. We just get find someone completely unrelated to just react to the podcast.
There we go. What's that one dude who mutters to himself sinisterly and never just has a stream of just babble? Was XQC or something? Do you think we could get him to just react to audio?
No, I don't.
Well, I tell you what, guys, here's a little homework for engagement in the comic session. Who would you like to see react to our content?
You are in no way required to put that in the comments section.
I'd really prefer that you didn't usurp my authority in front of our audience.
Speaking of nothing,
I'm about to say, I dare you to segue there.
Let's moving on. Let's talk about me and my pick for next time. Duke, you want to do something old or less old?
Well, wow, why you once again, it's always on me.
Duke, I feel like I'm making sure you're engaged
Well,
with the conversation here.
You know me, I love them old movies.
Great, then we're gonna do Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's in some ways it's a classic.
I think I've seen that probably at least 5 times.
Yeah, it's been many years, which I'm hoping will reinstill all of the funny that I squeezed out of it by watching it over and over and over again.
All of the tomato paste.
But yeah, that's what we'll be doing next time. And
if you don't want to miss it, you should hit the subscribe button.
And the notification thing and the like button. And you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Castbox, and of course, YouTube.
And most importantly, regardless of where you're listening to us, keep it cool.